Do you remember the feeling of watching Galaxy Quest for the first time in 1999? Initially, many people thought this was just a cheap Star Trek parody movie. But surprisingly, this work captured the hearts of the audience rising to become one of the most sincere and warm science fiction stories of the 90s. Veteran fans even silently acknowledged to each other that this is the best Star Trek movie ever released in theaters. Where did that magic on screen come from? The truth is that behind the smile of Tim Allen, the charm of Sigourney Weaver, and the sarcastic, helpless eyes of the late actor Alan Rickman lies a chaotic behind-the-scenes setting. This masterpiece was not born from a flawless script. It was molded by funny accidents, brilliant last-minute improvisations, and a series of secrets that Hollywood has carefully hidden for over 2 decades. Today, join me in uncovering 15 facts and lucky accidents that shaped this monument. Are you ready to start the ship? NSEA Protector. 1. The original director left the project because he could not stand the male lead. Today, it is hard to imagine Galaxy Quest without Tim Allen in the role of Jason Nesmith. But what few people know is that this actor almost never stepped onto the NSEA Protector ship. In the early development stage, the project was under the guidance of Harold Ramis, the legendary director behind Ghostbusters. Ramis had a very different vision for the main character. He believed that Alec Baldwin was the perfect choice to lead the movie and was said to have pushed this idea to the studio many times. However, the studio saw another opportunity. In the late 90s, Tim Allen was one of the most beloved comedy faces in America, thanks to Home Improvement and The Santa Claus. The executives believed that his appeal would help the movie reach a wider audience. The disagreement grew bigger and bigger. Finally, Harold Ramis decided to leave the project instead of continuing with a direction he did not agree with. That was an important turning point in the history of Galaxy Quest. The interesting thing is that when the movie was released, Tim Allen himself became the soul of the work. Looking back today, many fans cannot even imagine anyone else who could take on this role better than him. 2. The sinister personal revenge through the name of the villain. Hollywood has long been famous for its surprising behind-the-scenes stories. But sometimes, the most interesting retaliations are hidden right in front of the audience without anyone noticing. In Galaxy Quest, the most terrifying villain is General Saris, a ruthless alien warrior who constantly pursues the NSEA Protector crew. This name sounds completely random, yet behind it is a rather humorous personal story. According to many behind-the-scenes sources, producer Mark Johnson took inspiration from the name of the famous film critic Andrew Sarris. The reason was not out of admiration, but quite the opposite. Previously, Sarris had given very harsh reviews for another project that Johnson co-produced. Instead of publicly responding in the press, Johnson was said to have chosen a much more mischievous way. He put that name into the movie and turned it into the name of the biggest villain in the story. The interesting thing is that the majority of the audience never knew about this inside joke. But once discovered, it makes Galaxy Quest look even more like a colorful behind-the-scenes picture, where even real-life conflicts can become a part of cinema. 3. The authentic captain once boycotted the movie, then changed his mind. Perhaps no one is surprised to learn that many people in the Star Trek community once doubted Galaxy Quest before the movie was released. Among them was a special name, Patrick Stewart. As someone closely associated with the legendary Captain Picard image, Stewart initially thought that Galaxy Quest was just a movie mocking Star Trek. And honestly, that reaction is completely understandable. For many years, Star Trek had become an important part of American pop culture. Any work inspired by it was easily seen as disrespectful. But after being persuaded to go see the movie, everything changed. Patrick Stewart later admitted that he laughed more than he imagined. Not only did he not feel insulted, he also realized that Galaxy Quest was actually a sincere tribute to the science fiction fan community. Perhaps that is the biggest compliment the movie could receive, conquering even the person who doubted it the most. 4. The rock monster and the bitter sarcasm. One of the most bizarre creatures appearing in Galaxy Quest is the giant rock monster that the crew has to face on a strange planet. To the audience, it is simply a dangerous challenge. But to those who understand the history of the science fiction genre, this is also a multi-layered joke. Many years prior, William Shatner really wanted to put a similar rock monster into Star Trek V. He believed that this creature would create a spectacular scene on the big screen. However, a familiar Hollywood problem appeared: the budget. The idea was eventually cut because the production cost was too high. And then, many years later, Galaxy Quest decided to turn that into a behind-the-scenes joke. The rock monster appears like a wink to those who know the old story. The lovely thing is that the movie does not mock in a malicious way. On the contrary, it is like a friendly tease between people who share a love for the science fiction genre. That is exactly the type of humor that makes Galaxy Quest beloved to this day. 5. The swear word blatantly silenced on screen. One of the most interesting secrets that many viewers do not realize on their first watch appears in a moment that only lasts a few seconds. In a chaotic scene when the whole crew is facing danger, the character Gwen DeMarco, played by Sigourney Weaver, blurted out an angry reaction. On the official movie version, the audience hears her say, "Screw that!" an exclamation light enough so the movie could keep its PG rating and reach a large family audience. But here is the interesting part. If you pause the frame and closely observe the mouth shape of Sigourney Weaver, many fans have discovered a detail that is almost impossible to ignore. Her lip movement completely does not match the word screw. Instead, her mouth shape matches a much stronger phrase, "fuck that." In other words, while filming, Gwen seemed to have actually sworn because she was so angry. Only in the post-production stage was the dialogue dubbed over to pass censorship requirements. The funny thing is that the sound was changed, but the trace of the original phrase remains intact on the face of the actress. More than 2 decades later, this is still one of the most famous behind-the-scenes details that Galaxy Quest fans like to whisper to each other every time they rewatch the movie. 6. The perfect disgust of Alan Rickman. There is a very interesting paradox in Galaxy Quest. One of the elements loved most by the audience is exactly what made Alan Rickman feel the most tired. In the movie, the character Alexander Dane has to constantly repeat the famous phrase, "By Grabthar's hammer." Every time he utters that line, he wears a bored expression, as if enduring a burden that has lasted for many years. What makes the acting scene so authentic is because Rickman truly understood that feeling. He was famous for complex and deeply layered roles, so having to repeatedly say a simple catchphrase made him feel quite reluctant in the early stages. But instead of fighting that emotion, Rickman put all his frustration and exhaustion into the character. The result is wonderful. Alexander Dane became the perfect image of an actor trapped in the most famous role of his life, and it was the true emotions of Rickman that helped create moments that are both the most humorous and touching in the movie. 7. The direct slap in the face to the Star Trek monument right on the hull. Galaxy Quest has always been considered a love letter to science fiction fans. But the interesting thing is that this love letter also comes with many mischievous jokes. If you look closely at the hull of the NSEA Protector, you will see a small code printed on the outside, NTE3120. For the majority of the audience, it is just a meaningless sequence of characters. But for veteran fans of the sci-fi genre, this is an extremely smart joke. NTE is explained by many as an abbreviation for the phrase, "not the Enterprise," meaning not the Enterprise ship. This is clearly a humorous wink towards Star Trek, the franchise that inspired almost the entire movie. What makes this detail interesting is that Galaxy Quest never tried to mock Star Trek in a malicious way. On the contrary, the movie both honors and gently teases that monument. And the NTE code is the perfect example of the subtle humor that viewers usually only discover after many years. 8. The deception campaign that was ahead of the internet era. Today, simulated universe-style promotional campaigns appear everywhere on the internet. But in 1999, Galaxy Quest did that long before it became a trend. Instead of launching a regular movie advertising website with posters and trailers, the marketing team came up with a much bolder idea. They created a website that looked exactly like a fan forum. The outdated interface, simple colors, naive comments, and the characteristic design of the late 90s internet made everything look extremely authentic. The interesting thing is that this website did not promote Galaxy Quest as a movie at all. It was built as if Galaxy Quest was a real sci-fi television show that had existed for many years and possessed a loyal fan community. To young people today, that might sound quite normal. But at a time when the internet was still a wild and curious land, this deception made many people believe that they had just found a real fandom. Looking back after more than 2 decades, this is considered one of the most creative and ahead-of-its-time marketing campaigns of Hollywood in the late 90s. 9. The masterful censorship bypassing trick of Tony Shalhoub. One of the most subtle acting performances in Galaxy Quest is something that many viewers do not even realize when watching the movie for the first time. If you remember the engineer character Fred Kwan, played by Tony Shalhoub, you probably also remember the strange feeling every time he appeared on screen. While everyone was panicking, screaming, or racing against time, Fred almost always kept a calmness to the point of being incomprehensible. He spoke slowly, reacted gently, and never seemed truly stressed. That was entirely the intention of Tony Shalhoub. The actor wanted to build Fred as someone who always had the feeling of floating on the clouds, like living in his own world. However, because Galaxy Quest was aimed at family audiences, the movie could not directly imply the use of stimulants. So Shalhoub came up with an extremely smart way to convey that idea. He constantly had his character chew snacks, keep his eyes wide open absently, and create the feeling of being a few beats slower than everyone around him. The result is that Fred Kwan became one of the most memorable supporting characters in the movie, and also a perfect example of how acting can tell a whole story that the script never speaks of. 10. The aspect ratio secret that fools the eyes in the theater. There are cinematic tricks that work so powerfully that the audience feels their effects but does not know why. Galaxy Quest possesses such a wonderful example. During the first 20 minutes of the movie, when the story still takes place on Earth with signing events and the boring lives of the cast, the image is shown in a relatively narrow aspect ratio. Everything feels normal, even a bit confined. But then a magical moment happens. When the characters first step onto the real spaceship and the door opens before their eyes, the frame suddenly expands into a larger cinematic format. Viewers almost do not realize what has changed, but the brain feels the difference immediately. The world suddenly becomes larger. Space is deeper. The adventure also becomes more epic. It is an extremely sophisticated visual storytelling trick, helping the audience feel like they are leaving reality to step into an interstellar journey. 11. Steven Spielberg intervened in the script at the last minute. Not many people know that one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history once had an influence on Galaxy Quest. During a visit to the set, Steven Spielberg was shown the scenes being filmed. According to many behind-the-scenes stories passed down, he was particularly interested in the alien character Laliari, and quickly realized the emotional potential this character could bring. Spielberg thought that there was an interesting connection between Laliari and engineer Fred Kwan that the original script had not fully exploited. He made some suggestions to further develop the romantic element between the two characters. It was not a very big change, but it added warmth to the story. The lovely thing is that Galaxy Quest always balances humor, adventure, and emotion very well. The small moments between Fred and Laliari make the characters more relatable instead of just being chess pieces in a space adventure. And sometimes, just one suggestion from the right person is enough to make a lasting difference. 12. The 100% real terrified expression was not acted at all. One of the things that brings Galaxy Quest to life is the natural feeling among the actors. And sometimes, the most memorable moments are not entirely in the plan. In a movie scene, when the crew faces the terrifying shape of the alien, the character Guy, played by Sam Rockwell, suddenly screams with a much stronger intensity than what his co-stars predicted. That scream rang out so suddenly that Sigourney Weaver was completely taken by surprise. If you watch the scene carefully, you will see the startle clearly showing on her face. Her eyes widen. Her body reacts instinctively. There is no feeling of an actress trying to act. That is simply the real reaction of a person who is panicked in an unexpected moment. Usually, off-script details like that would be cut in the editing room. But this time, the director decided to keep it because the emotion was so authentic. The result is that the audience gets to witness a rare natural reaction, something that helped the scene become much more lively. 13. The most classic line was just a rough draft. In cinematic history, there are lines that are polished over many months. But sometimes, the quotes remembered most by the audience appear completely by accident. By Grabthar's hammer. Today, just mentioning that phrase, millions of Galaxy Quest fans immediately smile. It has almost become the official slogan of the movie. Yet few people know that originally, this line was just a temporary text in the script draft. The screenwriter needed a sentence that sounded like classic science fiction oaths, so they just wrote it on the page with the intention of changing it later. But a strange thing happened. During the filming process, the actors and crew members began to constantly joke with each other using this line. One person repeated it, another copied it. It gradually became an inside joke for the whole crew. When everyone realized that the line had lived a life of its own outside the script, no one wanted to replace it anymore. And then a sentence written just to fill space became one of the most immortal lines of Galaxy Quest. 14. The real model of the male lead is not Star Trek. For many years, the majority of the audience believed that Jason Nesmith was a humorous version of Captain Kirk in Star Trek. And indeed, on the surface, there are many similarities. Both are leaders who like to stand in the center. Both possess an almost excessive confidence. But according to Tim Allen, his true source of inspiration came from a completely different place. The actor revealed that he had studied the performance of Yul Brynner in the epic movie The Ten Commandments. What attracted Allen was not the appearance, but the charisma. Yul Brynner walked with absolute majesty. He spoke as if everyone around him had to listen. That confidence sometimes even carried a dictatorial tone. Tim Allen took that exact energy to build Jason Nesmith. Perhaps that is why this character never became a simple copy of Kirk. Instead, Jason brings a very unique feeling, both humorous and obnoxious, but ultimately making the audience unable not to love him. 15. Alan Rickman made the props himself. If there is any actor who understands his character down to the smallest detail, that person is definitely Alan Rickman. In Galaxy Quest, he plays Alexander Dane, a depressed actor because he had to spend his whole life attached to the alien character Dr. Lazarus. To express that perfectly, Rickman did not just study the psychology of the character, he also paid special attention to the outward appearance. According to many behind-the-scenes stories, Rickman was very deeply involved in the process of perfecting the makeup of Dr. Lazarus. He wanted to create a design that felt very special. On one hand, it had to be realistic enough for the viewers to believe that this is a famous alien character in the Galaxy Quest universe. But on the other hand, it also needed to carry a slightly old, slightly ridiculous, and slightly cheap look, like the makeup style of a television show that was famous many years ago. That balance helped Alexander Dane become a character who was both tragicomic and pitiful. And like so many other wonderful details in the movie, the majority of the audience did not even realize how much thought had been put into that makeup layer. More than 20 years have passed, and the phrase "never give up, never surrender" from Galaxy Quest still inspires intensely. Random accidents and wonderful sincerity from the cast have turned this unstable project into the warmest science fiction masterpiece of the 90s. Personally, I believe that it is that imperfection that created a perfect legacy. Which secret surprised you the most? Please comment right now. Remember to subscribe to the channel